Good evening, everybody. It's 10:29, close enough to 10:30. I think I might just about hit it right now. Welcome to Nightcap number 23 for May 18th. Again, closing in on 6 months, and who would have thought? Tomorrow is May Ray Day. I don't think we're going to get many May rays, as scattered showers will continue throughout the day, and probably maybe some thunder boomers, maybe between 3 and 7. Hi, Barb. Thanks for hanging in, being first to check in. We're going to have a good crowd, I'm sure. And, of course, if you miss it tonight, it'll be on demand all week, of course. But thanks to those of you who join in on Monday night, because it's really fun talking to people. You know, I do it every day for a living, so it's really fun talking to people. Hi, Barb's there, and there will be some more joining in, I'm sure. Let's see. Back years ago, many years ago, starting in 1934, there was a radio preacher who later became a TV preacher named Herbert W. Armstrong. And he used to have a program called The World Tomorrow. Started in radio in 1934, and then, of course, then it became a TV show that was on for decades. After Herbert W. Armstrong passed, he had a son named Garner Ted Armstrong. And Garner Ted Armstrong also had a radio show. He may have done TV, I don't remember, but he did a radio show. And when I was working in Mount Vernon back between 1974 and 76, Garner Ted Armstrong ran every night at 10 o'clock on WMIX in Mount Vernon. Garner Ted was quite a fella. He was not like his dad at all. He was a radio preacher like his dad, but Garner Ted was a little more, we would perhaps say a little more worldly. And I don't mean otherworldly like Herbert, more worldly in terms of flying around in his jet. In fact, on a lot of his shows, most of them actually, he would always start it out, say, as I'm on my jet headed to the Middle East to do more research or something like that, he would start out. But he was on his jet doing his show a lot more, I think, than he was in his studio. Or at least he said he was on his jet. I didn't hear the engines roar, so I can't say for sure. Hi, Betty. Hi, Jim. Good to see you. Hi, Randy. Thanks for joining in tonight. It is a wet Monday. We've had a lot of rain over the last few days. And it's not going to end, but boy, there was a beautiful rainbow. I put a picture up on the Facebook page earlier, and it was actually even a double rainbow. Just above it, you could see very, very faint, another rainbow up above. But the colors on the main rainbow, the lower one, was just absolutely beautiful. You know what the rainbow always was? The rainbow was the great sign that the great flood was over. Didn't mean to start out with religion. There were just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Another thing I wanted to mention right off the bat, and we have so many things to cover tonight. I promise you, we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about. Dr. Hook, Dennis Locarriere. Dennis Locarriere is 76 years old. He was Dr. Hook of Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. Of course, songs like Sylvia's Mother and When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman. Passed away over the weekend. He was 76 years old. And another musical note to point out, I don't know if you watched Saturday Night Live, if you watch that on a regular basis, or you happen to tune it in because you knew Paul McCartney was going to be on and Will Ferrell was going to host it. But it was interesting. Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers came on, and he came out to do the opening monologue instead of Will Ferrell, dressed to look like Will Ferrell, and he looks like Will Ferrell anyway. I think he had a gray wig because Will's hair is gray now. But he came out and started doing the monologue, and then Will Ferrell came out and shoved him away. Paul McCartney was terrific, by the way. So glad he did Band on the Run. And then at the end, he did Coming Up. And then as the show was going away, he was doing Coming Up. And he stayed around and did 3 or 4 more songs for the cast and the crew and the audience in the theater. So that was really, really cool. So way to go, Paul. Sean and I were talking today. First on the agenda is names of some towns in Illinois that I don't know that you've heard of. I've never heard of some of these, but we always talk about towns with funny names, or counties with funny names, or creeks with funny names, things like that. Of course, there's a band called Lick Creek, and I did not know that they took their name from the town Lick Creek. And of course, you know, some of the silly names. Campsville, pronounced with, or spelled with a K, not with a C, but you pronounce it like C or K. Hometown, evidently they couldn't come up with a name, so there is a Hometown, Illinois. And there is Bone Gap, and there is Ullin, U-L-L-I-N, not Olin, but Ullin. And then Muddy, of course, where you wipe your feet when you come in and wipe your feet when you leave. And I guess the best one of all, maybe tied for first, Chicken Bristle, which I'd never heard of, you know, where the people are friendly and the chickens are nervous. And also Goofy Ridge is another one. Don't call their ridge normal. But in Missouri, I think Missouri has some that are even better than ours. They have Tightwad and Peculiar, Knob Lick, of course, and Cooter, Henpeck Hollow, Conception Junction. I don't know if there's a Sesame Street in Conception Junction. There's Butts, there's Monkey Run, and Success, Missouri. So, okay, that's that. Those are the silly town names. Now, to the meat of what we want to talk about. In 1940, it's a long time ago, of course. In 1940, we're looking 86 years ago. The average worker in the United States earned about $1,368 a year. That's roughly $25 a week. And while that figure did rise during the course of the decade, it still sounds pretty much like a meager amount compared to today's standards. Back then, $1 could stretch remarkably far. What could you get with $1 in 1940? Well, the dollar in 1940 is equivalent to $23.34 today. $23.34. That is crazy. Yes, Jim, Beneld would be pretty much the top of the list of the most difficult towns to pronounce in America. That is amazing. By the way, Jim, I saw him, I saw him last Monday night before the show. He was at the Litchfield Library and visiting, and signing his book. And he told me that he has done about 3,000 sales of the Beneld and the Booze Gang, which I think is just amazing. And I'm sure that number is only going to go up as more and more people talk about it and more people are made aware of it. In 1940, $1 would get you 10 loaves of bread. 10 loaves of bread. Let's see, today, a loaf of Aunt Millie's sourdough or Aunt Millie's 16 grain is about $3, I think. And just a loaf of Wonder Bread, white Wonder Bread, is about, what, $2.30, something like that. I guess you can do generic for around $1, maybe a little over. 10 loaves for $1 in 1940. You could get 3 dozen eggs. 3 dozen eggs, that's pretty good. And possibly as little as 27 cents, they say. You could get 20 Hershey's chocolate bars. Yes, a Hershey's chocolate bar was a nickel. And I remember when they went to a dime, because I think when I was still, less than 10, you could still get it for a nickel. I remember growing up in Ramsey, as I talk about so often, going up to visit my dad at the Shell station that he ran, and later on working there. We had a Coke machine that you could get a Coke for a nickel. 6.5-ounce glass bottles. You don't see many glass bottles anymore, but I know that machine only held 6.5-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola. There was no Diet Coke, there was no Sprite, there was no orange or root beer. Later on, I remember we got the first machine that was a dime, and it had about 10 rows, so you could put orange and root beer and Sprite in there as well, back when they went to a dime. And I also remember the Dr. Pepper guy coming around. They had, just like the beer guys today go in and try and promote the product and get placement. The Dr. Pepper guy came around. I remember him getting out of his car and carrying just a 6-pack of bottles and with a bottle opener and say, "Here, have one. Maybe Dr. Pepper is something you'd like to put in the machine." That they did. You could buy 4 pounds of coffee for $1. Boy, how about that today? You get a pound of coffee for about $4, I think now. 4 pounds of coffee, and then so many people, and me included, use pods, and boy, that does add up, doesn't it? Coffee was rationed in America from 1942 to July of 1943, July of 42 to July of 43, to make sure there was enough for the soldiers fighting in World War II. You could get about 6 gallons of gasoline. It was 15, 16 cents a gallon. I remember driving to Carbondale when I was going to school there back in 1970. Driving through a little town, New Menden, down Route 51, south of Centralia. There was a gas war going on, and I remember paying 13 cents a gallon in 1970. But, it was ordinarily around 23 and 27. And how it got down to 13, I'll never know, but it did. 13 cents a gallon, and you don't forget that. And I was driving a Volkswagen, which had about a 6-gallon tank, so I could fill up my tank for $1. 4 movie tickets. Movie tickets cost about $0.25. In 1940, you could get, and this will really break your heart, 33 first-class stamps for $1 in 1940. It did increase to 4 cents in 1959. That is something. I have to read another note here. 46 years ago today. Thank you, Jeremy, for pointing that out to me. We'll drop that in. 46 years ago today, Mount St. Helens erupted back in Washington State. That was in 1980. Yes, it was. That's something. You could also get 2 haircuts for $1. Haircut costs roughly 50 cents, whereas today, of course, a good men's haircut, what is it around here? 20 bucks? 16, 18, somewhere around there. And you could get 1 pair of silk stockings for $1 back then. And they were silk. They weren't nylon. They weren't pantyhose either. But that's just some of the things. That's what you could get for $1 in 1940. How about those Cardinals? Hello, Mary Beth. How are you? It's nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in. I think the first time for you. You're staying up late. I know. You're not really. This is about the time most of us do. All right, the main thing we want to talk about today, other than the Cardinals taking 2 out of 3 from the Royals and taking a night off before the Reds come to town. You probably have been watching on the news. If you watch St. Louis news, you've been hearing all the stories about the meetings going on, mostly in Franklin County, Missouri, down in Festus, and then, of course, they're talking about it out in Union, Missouri as well, having a data center, and all the people who are saying, no way, we don't want it. In fact, in Franklin County today, there was a meeting that started at 9 o'clock this morning, and it was still going on. I think it wrapped up, if it did wrap up, around 7 tonight. But more than 10 hours, and they had only gotten to 2 of the issues they wanted to talk about. And that is, they don't want a data center. Now, why don't they want a data center? Have you been trying to keep up and figuring out what data centers' real cost is going to be? Here's an idea. Out in Utah, there is a plan to build a data center in northwest Utah, and it was approved. The plan was approved by county commissioners last week. It'll span 40,000 acres in northwest Utah. Almost 4,000 people have filed complaints against the $100 billion project called Stratos. It's being helmed by a guy named Kevin O'Leary. He was in the movie Marty Supreme. O'Leary says Stratos will create 10,000 construction jobs and 2,000 permanent ones. Now, Business Insider says more likely 4,000 construction jobs over 10 to 15 years, and 1,350 permanent roles are more realistic. The environmentalists, though, warned that this facility, requiring 9 gigawatts of power. Now, a megawatt is a lot of power. A gigawatt, obviously, is a lot more. 9 gigawatts of power, more than the entire state currently uses. Now, think about that. 9 gigawatts of power is more than what the entire state of Utah uses. And they will use 9 gigawatts of power in this data center. It could destroy, they say, the Great Salt Lake ecosystem because it uses so much water, demands so much water, and it will raise the temperatures in the area by 5 degrees during the day and by 28 degrees at night. 5 degrees during the day, 28 degrees at night, a temperature raise if they build this data center. Now, Maine and other states are pushing back. Of course, you know, the state known for lobster and, you mean that Portland, expected to pass legislation this spring that would place a moratorium on data centers that consume more than 20 megawatts, not gigawatts, a rebuke of the swelling energy costs that come with these computing factories. Other states are considering similar measures. Well, statewide bans are on the table in 9 states. Pennsylvania will make it 10. When it's expected they'll propose their own. Activists in Ohio are collecting signatures to get a statewide ban on the ballot in November. And 2 states, South Dakota and Wisconsin, have rejected proposed bans on new data centers. Residents in Port Washington, Wisconsin voted yesterday on a measure that would stop future data center development in the town of 12,000 people. And there are at least 3 other municipalities around the country that are considering something also later on this year. The big picture, while evidence shows that data centers can be environmental hazards, a new study says that they create heat islands, remember, 5 degrees higher in the day, 28 degrees higher at night. They'll create these heat islands within a 6-mile radius that can cause pollution and deaths, but of course they're also job creators. And what do you think about that? I mean, seriously, 9 gigawatts of power, more than Utah uses, 40,000 acres, and they've already approved it in Utah. Let's hope maybe somebody scales back. You've seen all the major construction that's going on. You see right here in our area a new field of solar panels going up. Now this is going to create electricity that's going to help, certainly, and there's more to come. If you drive towards out the Hillsboro-Fillmore Blacktop and you look off to the right, you'll see a very large field of solar panels. And as you keep on driving, if you look through the trees, you'll see that that field extends much beyond what you can actually see from the road. You can see more. So, power is, well, power is needed, but an awful lot of electricity, how much is enough, how much is too much? And the issue really boils down to the grid. We don't have a grid that can handle that demand. We need things that, there are so many bits of our infrastructure in this country, locally, statewide, nationwide, that are not ready for these data centers. How many are out there now? Well, there's a few. None of them the size of what they're talking about in Utah, and probably none of them are the size that, well, all of the ones planned now are going to be at least close to that size of the one in Utah. That's why some municipalities, some states are saying no more than 20 megawatts, no more 9 gigawatt data centers. And this one may not be built. I mean, who knows if it's going to be built or not. But they have already approved it. Can the people do their part to make it not happen? I don't know. We'll see. So that's it. And what do you think about it? And what have you been reading? Have you been giving it some thought? We don't need to go back to candles, but at the same time, do we need this? And all of this, of course, boils down to our usage of the internet. It boils down to the use of AI. And what AI are you using? Are you using ChatGPT? Are you using Grok? Are you using Claude? Have you bought one of those apps that says, here's 20 all at once? You don't have to buy all the different ones. I'll readily admit I've used ChatGPT. Let me tell you what I use ChatGPT for. Not necessarily for my show. I do kind of draw the line at that. However, back in December, when we were just sitting around, some of us at the station, had a thought we should do something just for fun. And what I did was I asked ChatGPT to write a Christmas play. I said, ChatGPT, here's what I'd like you to do. I said, would you write me a Christmas play based on A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens? But spruce it up, make it a little more contemporary. Let's make, instead of Ebenezer Scrooge, let's make him Elon Musk. And let's have 7 or 8 characters. Write me a 3-act play, but make it only last about 10 minutes. And I said, go. I will tell you that it took 1.5 minutes, and it was done. Now, I tweaked it very, very little, but we recorded it, and we played it 3 times over the course of that last week before Christmas. I asked it to do that in about 50 words, and it gave me 500. It gave me sound effects. It gave me, the 3 ghosts. It gave me Scrooge. It gave me Bob Cratchit and his wife, and it gave me Tiny Tim. It was and a narrator. So, and that's what we did. Katie was the narrator. Caitlin was Mrs. Cratchit. I was Bob. Sean and Levi played the the Three Ghosts. And, of course, Mike Terriak played Tiny Tim, complete with a British accent, and he was terrific. But that was all done by ChatGPT in about a minute and a half. I haven't used it since then. And I don't know, it probably would even do a better job if I asked for it today. Maybe I'll ask for something along the lines of that play back 50 years ago, 1776. Maybe it'll give us something for the 250 years. I guess maybe I can try that. And if I do, I'll let you know and tell you when we're going to play it. But it would be fun. There's no question about that. We actually all got together on Zoom one night and recorded it. So, yeah, you know, we use the internet too. That's that. Data centers and everything else. The next thing I want to mention to you, so I have to read Jim's note here. Oh, yes, of course. China does not want us to have data centers because they're building them as fast as they can. And, of course, you know, they've got billions of people to help pay for it and work in it and do everything else. So they don't want us to be as smart, evidently, as them, regardless of the last visit. And by the way, Putin is going to China next week. I wonder if Xi is going to tell Putin the same thing he told Donald Trump. We'll find out. Eventually, we'll find out. Hi, Beth. How are you? Thanks for joining in. I'm sure you're not in favor of a data center somewhere around Christian Shelby County line. I have no doubt about that. And I don't blame you. I'm not for it either. Next thing I want to mention to you is coming up, of course, Memorial Day is coming up the 23rd, 24th, 25th. That's Memorial Day weekend. And then the following weekend, on the 29th, Friday the 29th, we're having a job fair at the radio station. We are woefully understaffed. We need a couple of new salespeople. Our good buddy Mike Niehaus has literally agreed to stay on, but he really wants to retire. And he wants to go camping a lot, and I don't blame him. The thing of it is, the job fair coming up on Friday the 29th from 2 to 5 in the afternoon is an opportunity for you, if you're curious, to come out and just visit, take a tour of the station a little bit, and talk to Brian, talk to me about jobs that are available. There's a lot of different things that you can do at a radio station. It's more than just sitting behind a microphone and talking, of course. There is office work, there is sales work, there is production work, and our production guy, Mike Terriak, is overwhelmed. He's doing an awful lot. You know that when you hear the commercials, because he's doing almost all of them. I do a few. Mike does most of the rest. Also, there is the opportunity to maybe work part-time. There is the opportunity to maybe do some news, even to be a stringer for us, to cover some things. All those things are available, and if you're just curious, maybe you're perfectly happy in your job. But if you're looking for a career change, maybe you'd like to just see what's available. There's nothing wrong with working on the radio. And the great thing about working on the radio is, you know, we use Facebook, we use the internet quite a bit too. And so, as you see, Caitlin does things on the internet as well as work for us. So we'll have an opportunity to visit. So I hope you do maybe come out and visit. I'll be glad to talk to you too. That'll be Friday the 29th between 2 and 5 p.m. Okay? Well, we about covered it, and I have one last thing to go over with you. I found this last week. Now I'm going to have to read it. That's why I'm leaving my glasses on here. But one of the things that a lot of people talk about these days, of course, when a person dies, you know, the traditional way is to bury them. You know, you have the wake and then you have the funeral. Some people are cremated. There is even talk about compost burials. That's a scary thought to me, and I can't imagine wanting that to be my end, but there are compost cemeteries. But I found online a list of very strange requests that people had given funeral directors for their loved one. And of course, these were not necessarily things that the loved one requested, but these are things that the people left behind requested, and probably had to do with some of the things that the person who passed loved, maybe enjoyed doing. A man who had always had folded up paper towels in his pockets, just in case he might need a paper towel. They put a roll of paper towels in his casket. A professional poker player was holding the royal straight flush, royal straight, ace, king, queen, jack, 10. I'm not a professional poker player, so I probably said it wrong. But he had the ultimate winning hand in his hand in the casket. A woman who loved shoes had 2 different shoes on. She had bought the same shoe in 2 different colors, and her family thought that would be funny. I don't know if she liked it, but they thought it might be funny. And of course, nobody saw him. One lady was buried in her terry bathrobe so all of her clothes could be donated to a homeless shelter. That actually wasn't a bad idea. I know I've heard of stories of people buried in their pajamas. I heard of the lady, and maybe you had read it too, of the lady who was buried with a fork in her hand because she wanted to be prepared for that banquet in heaven. A woman who worked as a clown her entire life was dressed as a clown. Her family set up a remote control so those bending over to look at her a little closer could be squirted with water from the plastic flower brooch that she had on. A gentleman was buried in a Superman top. He also went into the afterlife with his BlackBerry and the charger. One grandma wanted to be buried in satin powder blue pajamas and fluffy slippers. I'm going to be wearing them a while, so I might as well be comfortable, she said. A grandfather was buried with cookies in his pockets. His young granddaughter had predeceased him, and it was thought he'd like to have them for her. His other pocket had lifesavers in her favorite flavor. And a father of 3 young children had a teddy bear with him. When the casket was closed, pressure on it set off the voice-activated box and a recording of one of his daughters saying, "I love you, Daddy," played from the casket. And a woman who always knitted was holding her knitting needles with her partly covered with a knitted blanket. A note pinned to it said, "I'm going to finish this if it's the last thing I do." And on a similar note, one man preferred to be buried naked, wrapped in a quilt his mother had made. "I'm going out the way I came in," he said. So there you have it. If you can top that one, I don't care if you send me an email or a text and let me know. But that'll do it for us tonight. This has been number 23. We'll do number 24 next Monday night, and I hope you join me. And again, this will be on demand tomorrow morning. Have a great night, everybody. Hang in there. We've had a lot of rain, as you well know, and the rain's going to continue for a few more days. But tomorrow, not so much. Hang in there, take care, and good night, and God bless you all, and I'll see you on the radio.